Hi. So we continue with a third term in the World Ayurveda Congress presentation, and that is a Markov's chain. Now, Markov's chain is supposed to be a stochastic model which by itself is an accumulation or is a group of many small stochastic processes. The beauty of this is that it starts from the current state and you can predict the future. It says that there is no bearing on the mathematical predictions or computations of the past, which means, as a highlight, it has three important points. One, the model has a memory-less property. Second, it allows for a state of a space, and there is a transition matrix that works from one state to another. In the context of Prakriti and in the definition of Prakriti, the factors that influence or those are talked about as being influenced or at the same time influencing are Vat, Pit, and Kaph, and Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. We have already discussed that these are dynamic in nature and they change from the conception to birth and in the reverse order from birth through the mortal life. This also means that in both these phases, there is an elapse of time, and that is aging. We also understand that there are cyclical factors like the daily rhythm, the seasons, the lifestyle and environment of a person, which is non cyclic. All these things go on to completely affect Prakriti at different times. Now, the argument here, and that is where modeling begins, that is why modeling becomes important, is that Prakriti goes through a change which is predictable. Like gestation, it starts from a Vat rich state or a Vat influenced state, and at birth, when gestation ends, it is a Kaph rich state. So we know that this is predictable. Similarly, mortal life begins in a Kaph rich state and goes until a Vata dominated stage when it becomes terminal. This progression is also known and is clear. So, while this change is predictable, yet there are many possible pathways to arrive. And in the course, say, let me talk about the mortal life of birth to death or terminality, there are intermediate stages. So when I say Kaph, in between there is a Kaph Pitta phase, there is a Pitta phase, there is a Pitta Vata phase, and then ultimately a Vataj phase. To arrive from Kaphaj to Kaph Pitta, that direction, that transition is definite. That is predictable. But how will it arrive? Which means, in the physiological sense, which physiological systems will be a part of it and how? What will be the different metabolic pathways to say is not known. Given every person's circumstances, lifestyle, geographies being different, the pathways will also be different. So the predictability of change of state is definite. How? Those pathways are not definite. And that in an ideal time frame we have a defined time limit, but in a living scenario this time limit is also variable. The only thing is the sets of influencing factors is definite, so it is a finite state. It is a finite set. Now, Markov's chain efficiently works when you have finite sets and you're talking about finite numbers or finite observations. So, capturing these impacts in a Markov's chain offers the best alternative as a model for modeling Prakriti and its evaluation on a much deeper scale than where we stand as of today. The point when I say that the change is definite from one to another, say Kaf Pith to Pith, it is definite. And on an ideal scale, we can assume that 121 years was divided on equal terms, so it becomes 24.2 years for every two states. But classically, in the practical world, this is not definite. This change can be lesser than 24.2 years and may be longer than 24.2 years. The pathways will definitely be different. And that means that there is a time dependency and there is also a time independency within the model. The immediate dependency is based on the current state, whereas the long term dependency is independent of what the future states are going to be, and the computations will arrive at almost the same values in a long term picture. Now, this further simplifies modeling while retaining the ability to predict future transitions. This means that if we use the Markov's chain model of Prakriti, we can analyze balances in doshas and predict the likelihood patterns of progression when we talk about chronic conditions like diabetes. Uh, we know that diabetes is by itself an age dependent disorder. Age dependent in the sense that it will end with the end of the disease. However, we also know that there are different systems that get impacted at different points in time, and no two diabetics necessarily have the same pattern of involvement of the other systems of the body. To say in the Ayurvedic context, the different srotas of the body. While it starts from one srotas and reflecting as the manifestations from it, it can be because of pancreatic issues, it can be because of hepatic issues, it may be because of a thyroid issue. The malfunction of any of these organs, or even adrenal glands issues, the malfunction from any of these organs can lead to a state of diabetes as a reflection. When we detect diabetes, we are always cornered with the idea that insulin production is there or is not there, or is less. But when we talk about the treatment, it begins from where we identify it. We do not trace back, or we cannot trace back where it began from. Until now, when we talk about this aspect of Markov's process, we cannot trace back. But we do have the ability to trace the future as to how this is going to pan out. We do not know the start, we have the ability to know the future as to how it is going to pan out. Now, this means that according to the Markov's principle, the long term evolution of an individual's Prakriti under stable conditions is going to be something which is not going to be a challenge. It will be stable but perturbed. And identifying the steady state distribution as a balanced state where fluctuations stabilize is of another important application. Now, this aspect of long term assessment of Prakriti, the long term stability of Prakriti, is significant because that is where disease and disorder prediction and management is all centered about. That is where geriatric care is all dependent. But when we talk about mathematics and when we talk about mathematical modeling, we have to look at a few other things. Like when we have cyclic influences like day or a year, they start from a point and they come back to that point. This means there is a periodic behavior. Now, when there is a periodic behavior, it is not going to allow a convergence from point A to point B. If this convergence from point A to point B is not happening, the probabilities will be zero. So, in that given state, it means that a cyclic behavior is going to hinder the convergence or hinder the transition from one state to another. This can be seen as an idea in terms of anti aging therapies or slowing down of complex conditions like cancer, slowing down the cycles of it, slowing down the basal metabolic rate to combat endocrinal disorders. This is called a cyclic convergence influence. There's another possibility that there is no such cycle happening and therefore there are non-cyclic factors that have to be seen. This means that the convergence is definitely going to be there. The paths compared to the cyclic version is more or less a linear path. There are different parallel paths also. There is also a possibility that two paths cross each other at different points. But the convergence from one to another point is more and more definite. That means the argument that it will hinder with any convergence does not happen, and it can accelerate or deaccelerate the entire process. And when we have both cyclic and non cyclic factors in the same system, the non cyclic factors are bound to dominate in terms of progression, and cyclic factors are bound to dominate in terms of slowing down the progression. This also brings us to a point which is normally not associated with the Markov's chain, and that is that in general we say that Markov's chains are processes which are independent of the initial state. But given the concept of cyclicity, the dependence on the initial state is very much there. Also, it referring to the initial state, not the current from where we are modeling, is also the idea that there is a internal dependency of the system. This gives rise to two possibilities. One is that there is an event or there are sequences of events that are going to happen one after the other and keep repeating. This is called as a recurrent aspect or the recurrent rhythm. However, these recurrent cycles can also be a part of the whole transition from cough to vata dominance as of the aging process, or reverse in the case of gestation. But in between, there are areas where this whole Markov's process assumes a cyclic nature and going back to the same initial state. A combination of, and this is bound to slow down the system. So, recurrent states, transient states, they come together and they can be analyzed for the possibilities of good health, of health that will matter for people over years. So, when we look at it, we need to talk about an understanding where the challenge and the future will lie when we do stochastic modeling and when we use principles like Markov's chain. It says that Prakriti's dynamic nature requires a well defined state of space, which means that comprehensive dosh combinations associated with health outcomes and life factors, they have to be observed. The transition matrix has to be observed because there is a developing accurate transition probability, and that means as per the longitude data, as per the dosh data, as per the integrations of Ayurveda with these stochastic models is concerned, the future of this element, this education, is very, very critical to Ayurveda and to those who think about developing and growing Ayurveda in a constructive way. To combat any of this, we need comprehensive data assessment and we have to validate the model as well from time to time. Now, when we have to look at it, Markov's chain possesses a promising framework for modeling the dynamic, cyclical, and time dependent nature of Prakriti. Time dependent, I mean age being the factor. By leveraging this ability to predict state transitions, we can have models which are enhanced disease prevention strategies, which are informed, personalized Ayurvedic treatment approaches, and they can provide deeper insights into an interplay of aging, lifestyle, and Prakriti. This also goes on to reflect the idea that uh, when we are considering a Markov's process for such changes into the system, we cannot discount nature. At the same time, we cannot also discount fruits and vegetables which are available there, but they are not the local produce, and those factors will go on to influence. How? I will be discussing those things in the next lecture. The best thing that you can achieve out of a Markov's process is that you can always enhance disease prevention strategies. You can inform personalized with patients over a long distance or over a call or even a personal meeting that things are slightly estranged, and at the same time there would be deeper insights into the play of aging, lifestyle, and constitution. The integration of Ayurvedic principles with the dynamical recur through Markov's chains could revolutionize paroles assessment and healthcare delivery. Validations are impossible to achieve. For that, we'll have to give him, the programmer, the idea that there are elements which he needs to be aware of, and there are elements that he has to work on as a brief. Most important part here is that we are looking to integrate modern versions of science and mathematics into developing a model of Prakriti assessment, which by itself can drive a person to make it clear. And as he or she makes it clear, we have our answers and we can provide the tailored and customized situations or solutions to such people. Thank you.